And it looks like Goon's giving us a signal that we do have Rick Peterson on the line, former Mets pitching coach. Rick, how are you, sir?
Great. How you guys doing?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for joining us on Over the Top Sports Radio. And, what's new with you lately? I mean, we the book Crunch Time out. You got RickPetersonCoaching.com, your keynote speaker. Seems like you're keeping busy off the field.
Oh, it's a lot of fun projects. Yeah, absolutely. Not only speaking, but also doing some teaching, and I'm doing some consulting with a technology company. A lot of really good stuff happening.
And, Rick, I read the book Crunch Time, and first of all, for anyone that runs a business, owns a business, I think it's a must-read. It teaches great leadership qualities. For an athlete, absolutely, just the way that you've impacted athletes. It's described in the book, very good. But I also, Rick, and you can tell me if you agree with me, I think it applies to anybody on day-to-day their life with just dealing with anxiety and how they can turn negatives into a positive. Would you agree?
There's no question about it. First of all, there's over 45 million people in our country alone that have anxiety disorders. And what I've learned from as a coach, and then also in the project of doing this book, in the business sector and some of the elite performers in business, is that everybody deals with pressure in their own way. And literally what happens in that midst of pressure, whether it's career pressures, financial pressures, family pressures, if you're in sports, some kind of performance anxiety, but everybody deals with fear, worry, and doubt. And fear, worry, and doubt stand on four basic legs. It's a lack of preparation, a lack of talent, a lack of knowledge, and a lack of insight. So in that moment where fear, worry, and doubt is overcoming you, if you could push the pause button and ask yourself, am I prepared? Do I have the talent to perform this? Do I have the knowledge, and do I have the insight? If the answer is yes, then fear, worry, and doubt is only fiction. And that allows you to push that pause button and allows you to choose a different response. And you have to really ask yourself, do I want to respond this way at this moment? And if the answer is no, we have a choice that we can make a different choice and respond in a much different way. And this is what I've learned from the Tom Gladdens, the Pedro Martinez's, the Trevor Hoffmans, all these great athletes that I've been around, that they what makes them so special, they look at pressure situations as opportunities. I mean, I thought it was really interesting in Derek Jeter Day when they were interviewing Derek Jeter, and one of the questions they asked him, they said, Derek, do you ever get nervous during the course of a game? He goes, yeah, when my teammates are batting. I thought was real interesting.
Rick, another big part of the book is laughter and how important that is. And they get the example is used with you go out there going to Jason Isringhausen in the playoffs, and he tells you he can't feel his legs. Was on your mound visits to pitchers, was laughter the number one tool that you would use to try and break the ice for them?
Well, I think I wouldn't say the number one tool, but laughter, you need to have laughter in your toolbox. And one of the things that we recommend to people in everyday life, including our athletes, is that because of the use of technology and the access that we have to it, it'd be really great if, like, on your phone, whether it's a YouTube or whether it's a videotape or whether it's a movie clip, something that when you watch this really makes you laugh. I mean, like it's a real laughter response. Because when you're laughing, it's impossible to be nervous and have anxiety when you're laughing. The two cannot coexist. So people who laugh, and I think one of the great lines in the book comes from Iron Ed, who was a famed decorated Navy SEAL, and he said we were so prepared when we went into battle that we called the mission literally monkey business. And when I was talking to him as we were preparing for the book and collecting all this content for the book, he said literally we would be in the midst of enemy fire, and we would literally be laughing. We would say something that would really relax each other to make us laugh. So one of the things that, again, like we suggest for people on a coaching tip is on your phone, literally at your fingertips, have two or three like really go-to moments that really make you laugh, whether it's something you read or whether it's a videotape or a movie clip, because when you can go to that place and you can really see, you see things in a different way where you can bring some humor to it. So in that story, which was really interesting, so when Izzy was closing out the second game of the playoffs after September 11th, Game 3 was Jeter's backflip. We would have swept the Yankees if Jeter doesn't make the greatest play of all time in the history of postseason. But Izzy came in with a 2-run lead in the bottom of the ninth inning for Game 2. We had won the first game. And after Bernie Williams leads off with a double and he walks Tino Martinez with the winning run at home plate, Jason Giambi runs over to talk to Izzy. And as I'm sitting in the dugout, I turned to Art Howard, manager. I said, Art, I need to go to the mound. He goes, yeah, absolutely. And that's when I went to the mound, and I literally put my hand on his shoulder. And when I did, he was literally quivering. And I said, Izzy, are you okay? He said, Rick, I can't feel my legs. I said, yeah, but the good news is we don't need your legs to kick a field goal. We need your arm to make a pick. So anyway, he relaxed and closed out the game. But afterwards, I asked him, I said, what did Giambi say when he came over to talk to you? He said he asked me if I was okay, and I said, gee, I can't feel my legs. So Giambi looks at the sellout crowd in Yankee Stadium, and he pans the whole scene, and he turns back to Izzy. He goes, dude, just relax. He goes, it's okay if you screw this up. Nobody's watching. So he had that sense of humor right there to relax Izzy, even in that moment.
Yeah, so my first part of the question for you is, are you wearing your jacket while we speak right now? Because he always had the jacket on. But the second part is, you mentioned how you put your hand on his shoulder. And that's been the thing, too, that people talked about was, just like kind of that personal feel, just kind of like a relaxation tool where, maybe not a lot of people realize out there that haven't read your book or don't think too much about the psychology of pitching. But being a pitching coach is a lot more than just mechanics and what to throw, but it's also really the psychology part of it, too.
Without question. Well, number one, I do have my jacket on right now as we speak. but I think more than anything else, it's that the number one skill really I felt for a major league pitching coach is the mental game. And I have my education, but my degree is in sports psychology. Literally the mental game. And I think to your point. First of all, I grew up in both sides of my family, both my grandparents on both my mom and dad's side of the family. We had a fairly big family, and it was the kind of family like when you stopped over, like say after dinner just to visit, you got your brothers and sisters and your cousins. It's like when you were leaving, like it takes you an hour to get out the door because everybody's got to hug each other like 5 times, So I came from that kind of family that it was, we were always like affectionate, always a hug or a hand on your shoulder, whatever. And that's really kind of my personality, normally. But especially when you have this bond, with the people that you're coaching and the people that you're working with, that in the midst of that kind of pressure situation in the game, there seems to be, it's interesting because the pitching coach is think about this, it's the only person in all of sports that literally can call timeout and run out to the mound and have a private meeting with someone on the field in the midst of the game. Nobody else ever does it. And
they want to slow the game down.
Exactly. And one of the books I read early in my career was Ken Blanchard's famed bestseller, The 1 Minute Manager, because I really realized that I'm a 1 minute manager. In the midst of a game, when all the money's on the table, it's imperative that to get this person's mind back in the right place, being very task-oriented and being very, very present and mindful to what's the situation and what exactly do I need to do here to be successful. And that's truly the 1 minute manager. So I think from that standpoint, there became that bond that it's like, look, I'm not coming out here just to give you free advice. We're coming out here to get through this together. We're all in this together. We've laid a game plan out together in the course of that 5 days for your starter, or if you're a reliever. We talked about it before the game, how you're going to approach this guy in this particular situation. So it's just kind of like just a reminder. It's a real special moment, and to get people's minds calm and focused on the process of performing.
You were famous for saying you could fix any of Victor Zambrano's flaws in 10 minutes. Why were you so confident? What were the flaws that you saw in that?
Well, first of all, that's not true. So do you want to have a conversation about something that's not true, or you want to know the truth?
We'd love to know the truth.
I guess give us the truth.
Well, this is going to be a longer segment than what we asked for then. So what happened was, number one, I didn't know Victor Zambrano at all, other than the fact that he pitched against us one time when I was in Oakland. And I didn't know Scott Kazmir until he came to spring training, and I knew Scott for about 4 or 5 days because we knew he was going to get sent down. But we did get a biomechanical analysis of Scott Kazmir as well as 9 other pitchers prior to spring training, so I knew I knew the inside of his delivery. So as all these trade talks were going down, Jim Duquette came to me and said, "Yeah, we got a chance to get Victor Zambrano. He says, come on in and watch some videotape. Tell me what you think." So I was in there. Jeff Wilpon was in there. We had several people from the front office in there. So as we're watching the videotape, I asked Jim. I said, he goes, "Well, what would you do? What would you do with this delivery?" I said, "Well, I can see why he doesn't throw strikes. I mean, Victor Zambrano's batting average against him, against righties and lefties, was right at 200, with very few home runs. He had a lot of strikeouts, but he walked a lot of people. That was his real downside." And I said to everybody in the room, I said, "This delivery is not going to throw strikes." So they said, "What would you do?" I said, "Well, Jim, you stand up and you be Victor Zambrano, and then I'll take you through it, and I'll show you a couple of drills that we would do." So I took Jim through a couple slight little adjustments that we'd make, and he goes, "Wow, is it that simple?" I said, "Yeah, if he's willing to make some changes." I said, "We've done this with probably about 50, 60 pitchers in the organization. These are real simple adjustments. It's kind of like shifting furniture in the room. You want to move the couch over on the inside of the room and the chair on the other side. It's pretty simple, really. And as long as someone's willing to make some adjustments, they're just simple adjustments." And so we had about another week before the trade deadline. So I asked the trainers, I said, "What I hear that Victor Zambrano has some tightness in his forearm." He said, "Yeah, he's taken Vioxx for his forearm. He's got it's just really tender." Well, after we made so the day before we made the trade, Art Howe and I were in the office, in his office in Montreal. We were playing the Expos, and we had a conference call back to New York. So it was about an hour and a half long conference call, and Art and I really just listened because we didn't know anything about Zambrano or Kazmir. Everybody on the phone. So ironically enough, Bill Livesey, who was he was a top guy in Tampa when Victor Zambrano was there. He came over to be a special assistant for the Mets. He loved Victor Zambrano, and he knew him very well because he was with Victor for several years in Tampa. And I'm trying to think of naming the scouting director. I'll think of it. Al Goldis. Al Goldis was a scouting director for Cincinnati before he came over to the Mets. He could have taken Scott Kazmir prior to the Mets. They drafted before the Mets. He chose not to, based on the information he found out from his group of scouts. There were certain things that they did not like about Scott Kazmir. So they chose not to take him. So those are the two biggest influences. So on the phone, towards the end of the last couple minutes of the phone conference call, someone on the phone call asked me from New York, said, "Rick, Zambrano's delivery, how long is it going to take to make these adjustments?" I said, it's about a 10-minute thing. They're very simple adjustments. We'll take him down to the bullpen. And, if he's open to making some changes, he can do this very quickly, but then he's got to practice it. So the next day, that's what I said on the telephone. So the next day, I get a call from my oldest son. He said, "Dad, I just watched Baseball Tonight, and Tim Kirchin said Rick Peterson could fix Zambrano in 10 minutes. I said, "What?" I said, "Where the heck did he get that from?" So I talked to Tim Kirchin in spring training. I said, "Tim, so who called you on that phone call?" I said, "You have my phone number." I said, "If you wanted a comment from me, why didn't you give me a call?" And he said, he goes, Rick, I said, "Geez, you normally don't stutter. Why are you stuttering now?" I said, "Who called you?" And he said, "Well, I can't really say that, but it was a compliment because the people on the phone call felt like, we had a pitching coach that could help Victor Zambrano." And I said, "Well, to come out and say I could fix him in 10 minutes, number one, I don't believe that. Number two, I would never say that publicly. I don't even know Victor Zambrano until we get him. I'm confident that for people with his characteristics of delivery, and it's unbelievable. So for 2 years, every time Victor Zambrano pitched and every time Kazmir pitched, I'm getting blasted on the fan by Mike and the Mad Dog. And so now we're doing we had an event in January or before spring training, like the caravan event, and so we were on we did their show. The whole team did their show in the Hard Rock Cafe. So I was the last one to go on at the 7 o'clock, 6:45 hour, 6:45. So after the segment was over, both Mike and Chris, Mad Dog, said, "Well, Rick, what a shame! Like you had to take the hit for that trade." I said, "What are you talking about?" They said, "Oh, we know what happened in that trade." I said, "Well, what happened?" They knew more about what happened in that trade than I did. I said, "If that's the case, why are you killing me every time this goes on?" And they started laughing. They said, "Rick, don't you get New York?" And I said, "Tell me, what am I missing?" They said, "Never let the truth stand in the way of a good story." I said for 2 years, I said I literally the couple days before spring training, it was like right about this time, like this time of year, and my kids were with me. They were in high school at the time, and I'm cooking a big Italian meal for them. And I got the dish in the oven, and I open up the cabinet because I'm going to spring training. You're trying to use all the stuff before you leave because you're gone for the next 7 months. And so I needed a can of crushed tomatoes, and I said, "Oh, geez, I got 25. The oven was on the timer I have 25 more minutes." I said, "I can make it down there and back." So I go down to the store, and I got my jacket on, obviously, right, and hat, and I'm standing there with a can of tomatoes. And this lady standing behind me was about 70. Her hair looked like Einstein's hair. It was like all over the place. So she's leaning on her shopping cart, and she obviously couldn't hear, so she talked very loud. So in this midst of the grocery store, she goes, "I know who you are." And I said, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Hey, keep the faith, man. We're going in the right direction." She goes, "I just have one question for you." I said, "Yeah, what's up?" "Is 10 minutes up on Victor Zambrano yet?" I said, "Lady, take a break, will you?" And I don't know if you guys remember this, but when Victor, at his second year, he threw a pitch in Shea Stadium, grabbed his elbow, and ran off the field. He went into they took him in there. They were doing an X-ray on his elbow. I walked in there after the inning was over, and he literally I had my arm around him. He literally put his face on my chest and just like cried like a baby, like 5 years old. And he said, "You know what?" He said, "I never threw one pitch healthy here, not one." Well, if you remember, we made the trade, say, on a Wednesday, and Victor was supposed to pitch for us on a Friday or Saturday, but he couldn't pitch because, as it turned out, he was 5 days. He was 5 days on the steroid med pack, and he went to our team doctor for an examination. He left and flew to L.A. to see Dr. Yoakum, for an examination. He flew from L.A. to Birmingham to see Dr. Andrews. So within 3 days, he had 3 major exams by 2 of the top doctors in the world that understand Tommy John. He had already had a Tommy John surgery. He couldn't pitch for us for over 9 days. And I read the report from all 3 doctors. They said that the integrity of the UCL, the ulnar collateral ligament, is in major danger. And I went back to our people. I said, "Why are we not getting Kazmir back? This guy's damaged goods right now. His arm's like really bad." And from that trade, our team doctor got fired, our team trainer got fired, Tampa Bay's team trainer got fired, and there's now a new protocol from that trade, a new protocol in the commissioner's office of how medical information gets passed between teams before a trade will be approved.
Wow, that's crazy. I never knew that.
Yeah,
11:53 over.
Of course not.
11:53 over the Top Sports Radio. Rick Peterson joining us right now. Rick, I just wanted to ask you, as a big Braves fan in the 90s, and then you got to work with Zito, Mulder, and Hudson, and then recently, some of these guys are Mets fans with the Mets young pitching. What's the greatest pitching staff that you've seen in your time? Was it was it the Orioles staff in the late 60s? Was it that Braves in the 90s, or somebody maybe that I'm missing?
I think you probably nailed most of them. I mean, all those staffs were great. I have to honestly say, I'm not a real big baseball historian as far as going back and, I am in a mild way, but not like, in a crazy way, like, remember the 2-2 pitch in the 58 World Series in the 7th inning. That's not really where my mind is. I'm more interested in why people are really good and what makes them so good. And then and I'm more focused on the people that I'm coaching. But, obviously, the Braves staff is probably one of the best in the history of the game, and I don't think you can compare errors because they're not comparable really. The equipment's not the same. It's just like comparing, errors in golf. How can you go back to a Ben Hogan and compare him to a Rory McIlroy? The equipment's changed. Everything's changed. But when you look at the best staff I ever had was Mulder, Hudson, Zito on that staff, and Corey Lytle I think won 14 games that year as well.
Wow.
But those are some really special guys, and what made them so special, and this is what I think is where the Met young pitchers now with DeGrom and Syndergaard and Harvey and Matz and so on and Wheeler, I think what you hear, you didn't hear. Let me qualify. When you faced the Braves staff, no one really talked about what great stuff they had. They talked about what great pitchers they were. And the same thing with Mulder, Hudson, Zito. People said, they have good stuff, but that wasn't what people talked about. They talked about what great pitchers they are and that whole art of pitching. And with the Mets pitchers, everybody got so enamored with their stuff. But if you can't make great pitches consistently, that's the difference maker. And I think they got so enamored with their stuff that everybody talked about their stuff, and no one – they're just on the cusp, of maybe DeGrom is probably more advanced pitching wise than all of them. I think Syndergaard is right there when he's healthy, obviously, but Harvey's stuff at the end of the season last year was plenty good enough to win, without question. His location was terrible. That's why he didn't pitch well. So I think from that standpoint, I think this staff still has some major upside, and hopefully the perspective of the new people coming in here with Dave Island and Mickey, that they can get these guys in the right frame of mind in order to really untap their potential. Yep, you guys there?
Yeah. Sorry, we just had technical difficulties there, Rick. Sorry about that. Player analysts from you. We want to start with Shohei Ohtani, the new Japanese pitcher of the Angels just acquired. Do you think this guy's going to be any good? What should we be expecting from him?
Well, just looking at his, watching videotape of him, and then obviously listening to the people, some of the analysts from talking to the scouts that have actually seen him, I think his pitching projects, right now, without question. I don't think you're going to get a feel for how his hitting projects until he actually starts to hit against major league pitching, because the overall pitching in Japan is not as good as what it is obviously in the States, but the ability to locate pitches and the quality of his pitches that translates without question. But I think it's going to be really exciting. I think it's great that people have an open mind to take a player like this and to be able to look at him as a two-way player. I think it's going to be really exciting to really kind of get to know his personality. We really don't know anything about his personality other than that one, press conference that they had when they signed him. But I think it's going to be, just going to be a lot of fun to really observe and just take a look at is this going to turn out to be what everybody hopes? And I think everybody hopes that he's going to be a two-way player and be really good at both.
And, Rick, we just want to thank you again for joining us. I do wish we had a little more time with you. For everyone listening, rickpetersoncoaching.com. That's the website. The book is Crunch Time. I personally read it. It was terrific. And Rick's even into keynote speaking now, all on his website. The information is there. Rick, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully during the season, we'll be lucky enough to talk to you again.
Oh, my pleasure. Looking forward to it, guys.
Thank you, Rick. And again, for everyone on the website, rickpetersoncoaching.com. A lot of good stuff up there. Crunch Time, the book. I bought it off Amazon. It was here in 2 days. Quick read. I read it. It was absolutely terrific. Rick, thank you again.
My pleasure, guys. My pleasure. Take care.
You too.